Senzo Mchunu was in the hot seat again today in front of the Madlanga Commission. We have broken for the year, but I just wanted to say something before we get started. So tomorrow is the 6th of December. That is exactly a year ago when Witness A went looking for Katie Malefe, Witness B went looking for Lucky, and Witness C went looking for Jerry at Kat's house. And in this time of December, this is when Senzo Mchunu had that reflection period that no one told him to disband the PKTT. He had sudden reflections on the 29th, and then he decided that while the rest of South Africa was partying, while I was drinking my Zamalek, while you were out partying, while we were spending time with our families, he was going to save us taxpayer money by disbanding the PKTT immediately. But immediately doesn't mean immediate, it means later. And I can only have one piece of advice for him on his reflection period this December. Senzo Mchunu, if you are listening, come in front of South Africa and apologize, because it's going to be less painful for you than what the commissioners are busy doing to you and what they will continue to do to you from what I have seen today. Now, before we get started, remember to immediately hit that like button. Now, we've got to start off with the testimony of today and the cross-examination. And this was extremely technical. It got very technical and perhaps boring at times for some people, and many people got lost from where I was following on in the chat, but this is extremely important for a few reasons. So when Senzo Mchunu disbanded the PKTT, he came up with 5 reasons why it should be disbanded. Now, in excruciating detail that is making Senzo Mchunu squirm, the commissioners are busy taking him through those 5 reasons. And at every point, they are getting him to admit under oath on the record that each and every one of those reasons is incorrect. Today, we are going to get into it. And this is incredibly important because Senzo Mchunu has come out swinging and doubled down, saying that he had the right to disband the PKTT. It was constitutional. And like I said, I think it would have been better for him just to come out to South Africa and say, sorry, I was incompetent, I was wrong. Because we are left with only 2 options here. Either he is grossly incompetent or there was political interference happening. Comment below what you think. So we started out the testing today with Senzo Mchunu's attorneys being late, and we know he has top legal counsel for this committee. And we know that Justice Madlanga does not like it when people are tardy. He always gets them to come and explain why they were late, and that's what he did with the attorneys today. I mean, you had Joburg traffic, I understand. But, you know, Justice Madlanga, he doesn't want to be wasting taxpayer time or money because this is a taxpayer-funded commission. And remember when Dr. Imogen Mashazi was late, he also told that we started late because of her. So do not be late when Justice Madlanga is involved. He does not like tardiness. Now, we've got to talk a little bit about the PKTT disbandment letter. And this letter is very important because the letter is written very simply. And I'm going to read a portion of it. Now, I want you to take note of what is not mentioned in this letter. In 2019, a directive was made to the National Commissioner of Police following the Muranye Commission report, even though not flowing directly from such that an interministerial task force be established. So let's break that down. So he is referring to the 2019 work study, which we are going to get into, and that work study indicated, which it doesn't, we'll get into it why it doesn't, that, you know, the PKTT should be absorbed into murder and robbery. And this is indicative because it says, even though not flowing directly from such that an interministerial task force be established. This says to me that Senzo Mchunu knew very well that he would have to chair the interministerial task force in order to disband the PKTT, because he is justifying it right there in that letter. And the key, we're going to continue on, the key mandate was to stop investigating unresolved murders of politicians in the country, especially in KwaZulu-Natal. My observation in this regard, as indicated above, is that the further existence of this team is no longer required, nor is it adding any value to policing in South Africa. Therefore, I direct that the Political Killings Task Team be de-established immediately. Further, a preliminary report in this regard should be submitted to the Minister by the 20th of January 2025. The final and closing report must be submitted to Ministry Management Executive Committee meeting in late January, a date of which will be communicated as soon as possible. So what we get from this letter, according to Senzo Mchunu, is that basically he references this 2019 work report. And he also references, with his own regard, that this team is not adding value to the policing in South Africa. These are two reasons that he gives for the disbanding of the PKTT. Notice where in this letter there is no mention of medieval persuasion techniques, otherwise known as T. There's no mention of that, of complaints. There is no mention of budget and overspending. There is no mention of many other things that he had grievances about, like the lack of political killings, or that political killings were under control. And this is important because this is what the commissioners did the whole day. They started with this letter because they were saying that it is a bunch of nonsense. And when you came in front of Madlanga Commission and you presented all your reasons, you are just grasping at straws. You are just throwing whatever you can to the wall to see what will stick. And nothing is sticking. And that is why my advice to him is to just come out, apologize, admit that you're incompetent, and move on. Because right now, that is going to be less torture than what is currently occurring and happening to you at this moment. Now, we got to start out with Advocate Sello. Advocate Sello is my favorite. Her and Advocate Baloyi. I mean, I wouldn't want to actually get on the wrong side of any of them because Advocate Khumalo is also fierce, as well as Justice Madlanga. And basically, we got to start with what she pointed out. Because remember, Senzo Mchunu, he said that he was thinking about disbanding this unit for a long time and that there were all these meetings that were had. He said that there were 3 meetings in November that were had. One on the 1st of November, one on the 21st of November, and I think the second one was on the 20th of November. I know everyone will correct me if I'm wrong. Please do in the comments below. You guys, you keep me on my toes. And this is significant because the minutes were only provided for one of those meetings, and that was the meeting on the 1st of November. And there were no minutes provided for the meeting on the 21st of November and the 27th of November and the 22nd of November. And when these minutes are not provided, it means simply it didn't take place. We have this saying in science, if you don't record it in your lab book, then it didn't happen. So this is a contradiction that she pointed out. And what she is doing is that she is systematically going to expose inconsistency after inconsistency in his statements. Now, what I believe the commissioners are doing here, they are testing whether he is being truthful about having long-term plans or discussions or a process in place to disband the PKTT. They are trying to dissect that this has nothing to do with Brown Mkhotsi 007's messages. This has nothing to do with the PKTT having that ballistics from Kat's house, from Katie's house. So this is what they're trying to test. They're trying to see that if he is being truthful about the statement that he wanted the PKTT gone from a long time. And key admissions that they got out of Mchunu during this process was that he had not worked out any process of disbanding the PKTT when he wrote that letter. He said something like, it was in my mind. Well, it's in your mind, but it's not on the paper. He says that he would look at the report of that the National Commissioner would have given him. But we know that that report, he never consulted with Fani Masimola on it. In fact, he did it while Fani Masimola was on leave. And the correct thing that he should have done, which is what we spoke about the other day, was that he should have gone to Fani Masimola and said, give me a briefing on the PKTT, because he was the best person to do it. And he says that he hadn't developed that process, but it was in his mind of how the PKTT was going to be disbanded. And this is vague language because, in my mind, means zero documentation, zero planning, zero information. This is just purely an excuse. I mean, this is not acceptable. And I think he knows this, but he is still standing down firm. We have to look at like the PKTT because we've only heard good things about the PKTT, except from a few individuals. So it seems, to my knowledge, that people have scoured the country looking for people to say bad things about the PKTT. And they only found 8 people who were willing to have their names given to the commissioner. 8. And I don't know, maybe Kat and Katie are also on that list. I don't know. Kat laid a complaint against the PKTT for stealing his Rolex, which he still has. So what we have to assess here is that they are grasping at straws. Senzo Mchunu is grasping at straws. And he previously testified that when Advocate Sello asked him, have the PKTT capabilities, have they ever been reviewed? Mchunu is vague. He has been very vague the whole of the day. He has been dancing around. He said internal assessments were made, and these assessments included all task teams. Now, remember yesterday when he didn't know any of the budgets for any of the other task teams? Well, we're going to have a little bit of a revisit on that now. And then he said that he previously testified that he didn't know much about the PKTT. That was on his first day of testimony on Tuesday. He didn't know they were making arrests. He didn't know that they were busy with all these investigations. And this is a direct, this testimony that he came today is directly in contrast to what he testified to on Tuesday. Because now he suddenly claims to know more about the PKTT. It's inconsistent, and his whole statements have been inconsistent. When Advocate Sello comes in and says that the minutes of this meeting of the 1st of November, the only meeting that we have, the minutes show no reference to future reviews. Mchunu says he insists ongoing reviews were implied. It was a work in progress. It was in his mind. And this is going to be a theme because he keeps adding that things were never written or said. But we know if we don't write it down, it didn't happen. Stuff like that should and would have been included in the minutes of the meeting if they had been discussed. Now, Baloyi comes in here at a critical moment, and she points out that minutes discuss other task teams, not the PKTT. And she challenges Mchunu, and she says, when was the PKTT ever reviewed? Now, Mchunu's admission comes in and he says there was no specific PKTT review. Now, why this is important is because these minutes talk about review processes in the future for task teams. So what the commissioners were trying to do, they were trying to say, hey, if you were thinking about dismantling the PKTT in November already, November the 1st, as you claim, then why are you not saying it number 1 in the minutes? And why are you referring to the PKTT's further reviews along with other task teams? Because this implies that the PKTT had a future. And it had a future at that moment at the 1st of November. So what happened between the 1st of November and the 31st of December? What happened in those 2 months? Perhaps some arrests, perhaps some raids on certain individuals. That's, I think, what happened. Because Mchunu eventually does agree to this. He concedes after a long battle. And this is a crucial admission in my own opinion. It proves that he was still considering that the PKTT had a future, contradicting a claim that the PKTT was useless and needed immediate scrapping. Like I said in my video yesterday, the PKTT was fine to operate in South Africa. The only time that it became a threat was when it stumbled into Armand Swart's investigation. And that is when it became a threat to the cartel. And the cartel deals with the PKTT like it does with any other threats, Babita among others, is that it takes them out. And that is what happened to the PKTT. It was taken out. Now, Advocate Sello comes and she asks a critical question. Was there ever a reconsideration or review of the PKT done between the 1st of November and the 31st of December? And she's trying to get information. She's trying to understand why he disbanded it and why what reasons he had to disband it. You can't just go around as Minister of Police disbanding task teams. First of all, it's not your constitutional duty. Secondly, you have to have information. You have to have information about, okay, their effectiveness is down, their prosecution rate is down. There is none of that. When you want to disband something, you have to launch an investigation, which he did not do. And Mchunu would reply that he never launched a review, or he read a review between the 1st of November and the 31st of December. So he disbanded a major national task team with zero process, zero review, zero discussion, and zero evidence. And this is important because the commissioners are trying to tie him down into that timeline of what happened between the 1st of November and the 31st of December. Now, Senzo Mchunu has given 5 different reasons for disbanding the PKTT, mainly the 2019 work study, budget constraints, the medieval techniques, the T allegations, that the PKTT is not needed and redundant, and that political killings were under control. Now, changing reasons, this is a classic sign of a cover-up. Stability in rational is expected from a truthful witness. Here, the reasons shift depending on who questions him, and he will often, when forced into the corner of one question, he will bring up another one. For example, when he was asked about the work study, then he would bring up the medieval techniques. And this is something that he does the whole time. And if we go back to that immediate PKTT disbandment letter, the only thing that's referenced there is the 2019 work study. And number 4, that the PKTT is redundant. There's no mention of budget. There's no mention of medieval techniques. There's no mention of political killings under control, which tells me that this was added later when he realized that he had to come before South Africa and he had to come before Madlanga and account for his actions. So before we get into the 2019 work study, my reactions on this. Mchunu repeatedly contradicts himself. He uses English in a very convoluted way. He beats around the bush, in my own opinion, and his decisions appear impulsive, undocumented, and possibly politically motivated. He uses phrases like "in my mind" and "ongoing reviews," which have no foundation in documents. They're not written down. The fact that no PKTT review ever took place during this time period, yet he claims it was useless, is highly suspicious. And his admission that the PKTT still had a future on the 1st of November destroys his justification for its immediate disbandment. Now, we've got to go into the 2019 work study. So what it is, what Mchunu claimed, and what the evidence shows. So, like I said, this evidence is extremely technical, but it is extremely important. Now, this 2019 work study is very important to Senzo Mchunu. This is something that he has treated like a Bible or a sacred religious text, because he refers it and he brings it up whenever he has the chance to in order to justify it. And this was one of the things that was mentioned in his disbandment letter. Now, Advocate Sello immediately challenges Mchunu on why he kept invoking the 2019 SAPS work study as a basis for disbanding the PKTT. And we have to ask ourselves 2 questions here. So question number 1 is, did the 2019 work study actually order the PKTT to be disbanded? Or question number 2, did Mchunu misinterpret it to justify an unlawful unilateral disbandment? Well, spoiler alert, it did not order the disbandment. Throughout this testimony, Mchunu made several changing claims about the work study. Throughout his testimony, he gives all these shifting explanations, including claim 1, that task teams are administratively untenable. He claims SAPS becomes overstretched with too many temporary task teams. He says proliferation creates admin problems. So he's blaming typical admin, but then Advocate Baloyi comes in and asks how this makes the PKTT untenable on the 31st of December. And then Mchunu basically goes to the medieval torture stuff. Like I said, this will happen often. If he's backed into a corner, then he's like medieval persuasion techniques. That's why, because that is the most shocking. And when asked about this, we're going to get into it later, but we know that Mchunu admits that he didn't know that the claims were true. He did not investigate personally any of these claims, and he did not discuss any of them with the National Commissioner. He disbanded a national task team because of unverified hearsay. Later on, we're going to get into it. Some of these complaints he saw on Facebook. This is the level of grasping that we are in. Now, claim number 2 is that he opposed all temporary task teams. Advocate Sello asks him if he wants all SAPS task teams abolished. Mchunu says correct, but he later contradicts. He earlier contradicted this in his testimony by saying that task teams should exist for GBV, substance abuse, and firearms. So this is completely contradictory testimony. He supports task teams when convenient, and he opposes them when discrediting the PKTT. And he even formed one just before he disbanded the PKTT. We're going to get into that later. So claim number 3, task teams may be unconstitutional. Baloyi interrupts him on this and interrogates him. And Mchunu flips, and eventually he concedes. He first suggests that temporary task teams may be constitutionally dubious, and then he admits that this was not a reason to dissolve the PKTT. It appears as if he floated the constitutional argument purely to justify his actions retroactively, in my own opinion. And then claim number 4, the 2019 work study recommended that the PKTT be dissolved. Advocate Baloyi challenges this hard. She tells him that the 2009 work study does not say this anywhere, rather that it should have been integrated. Eventually, he concedes, and he says that the work study did say that it shouldn't be dissolved, and he should have instead used the word integrate, not disband. This destroys his entire justification for immediate disbandment. Do you see how his arguments are looking? Do you see why we have to dissect them so carefully? Now, we got to go on, what did the 2019 work study actually say? Because Senzo Mchunu, he loves this document. This is his favorite document. According to evidence highlighted by Advocate Sello and Baloyi, it focuses on HR structure and special units, not dissolving the PKTT. It recommends integration of proliferated units into specialized divisions, and it requires proper planning, timelines, and phased absorptions. It did not recommend that the PKTT be dissolved, authorize immediate termination of any task teams, order the end of task teams, say that the PKTT is unconstitutional, or say the PKTT should be removed on the 31st of December, even though it had funding until March 2025. Mchunu used the work study like a political shield, despite no textual support for this. Now, Mchunu would then go on to claim that he was ready to integrate members of the PKTT into murder and robbery. This is what Mary Motsepe testified to. Remember, she received all the dockets, and he said that a decision has long been made to integrate the PKTT into murder and robbery, and that the PKTT was long targeted for integration. Now, Advocate Baloyi asks, if the PKTT was really ready to integrate, where is the review? We already know that there's no review. Did he ever assess whether murder and robbery were capable of taking over all of the PKTT's work? Mchunu replies with his usual jargon, I cannot be precise, and he refers vaguely to that March 2024 report, but cannot explain its contents, and admits that he didn't know the strength or readiness of murder and robbery. He didn't know the strength of any of murder and robbery units throughout all of the provinces. He made a vague regulation to the Northern Cape, but he said, "Oh, I've been to KZN, the murder and robbery unit there, but I don't know the stats. I don't know if they have space. I don't know what their success rate is. I don't know anything about them." A minister can't dissolve a specialized task team without assessing capacity. This is a huge red flag. Now, here comes, which is one of my favorite parts of the day. Why dissolve the PKTT and not the other task teams? So Advocate Sello and Baloyi list other long-running task teams. These are task teams that have been running perhaps just as long as the PKTT, or perhaps even longer. Operation Thunder, Operation Magzui. Let me know if I said that correctly, and guide me with correct pronunciation. And then we know that Senzo Mchunu actually established a task team, the Eastern Cape Taxi Violence Task Team. And they ask, why were these task teams not dissolved? Mchunu answers with his typical response. He says the PKTT had medieval persuasion tactics accusations against them. This is where he goes to, where he has nowhere to run. He runs to the medieval persuasion techniques. And he says that Operation Thunder was reinforcing an existing unit, which is something that he's going to repeat later on as well, because he's going to say the Eastern Cape Taxi Violence Task Team that he formed was also reinforcing an existing unit. This is very good. This is very integral, because if Senzo Mchunu was so concerned about all these task teams and overexpenditure and all these budgets, then why just disband the PKTT? Why not include these other task teams? We know from General Mkhonasi's testimony that there are 11 task teams that are currently being funded. And why not disband all of these as well? And this just shows that the disbandment of the PKTT was directed. It was personal. And the Butterworth example destroyed whatever argument he had left on this issue, because Advocate Sello presents a note. Oh my goodness, this woman is wonderful. Mchunu instructed the National Commissioner to establish a task team for taxi violence in the Eastern Cape in December 2024. Now, why do I love this note so much? It shows us two things. It shows us that he understood how task teams are created, disbanded. He knew that he had to go through Fani Masimola. He knew that his powers of under the Constitution were policy. This is a prime example of how he has used policy to enact changes. He has to instruct the National Commissioner, not the High Commissioner. I sometimes use them interchangeably, but it's the National Commissioner. He has to instruct the National Commissioner to develop all of these things, because you cannot have a politically elected individual from a political party running the police. You cannot have it. And this just destroyed the whole argument about the work study, about the disbandment of the PKTT. It was beautiful. And this task team that he had established had the same policy as the PKTT, and it was doing so well with getting rid of, the violence, that they extended it. They extended its lifespan. He stops the PKTT, but if he is so against task teams, he created one for another issue. Now we've got to talk about the medieval persuasion techniques, otherwise known as something that begins with a T, and complaint issues that were raised by Senzo Mchunu. These also did not feature in his PKTT disbandment letter. And we start out with Advocate Sello. She was on fire today. And she basically said, why are you, the Minister of Police, getting involved in all of this? These are HR matters, and HR should have handled them, not the minister. The SAPS has internal structures for discipline, ethics, and misconduct. Ministers cannot bypass these structures and rely on unverified allegations. And basically, what I got from that is that Advocate Sello was trying to show us that Mchunu overstepped his role and used HR complaints improperly to justify disbanding the PKTT. And Mchunu insists that the complaints went beyond the National Commissioner and landed on his desk. I find that highly improbable. He claims he referred to the matters to his deputy minister. We're going to talk a little bit about Fadiel Adams. He's going to come in here. And some complaints had run their course. He claims he submitted 8 names to the committee to test whether his decision to disband the PKTT was correct. Remember those 8 names that were handed over in a brown envelope to the committee of people who are willing to come forward and have complaints about the PKTT. But they don't want their names known. They want to be anonymous. And I think after scouring the whole country, you only find 8 people who are willing to complain about this unit. Sounds a little bit suspicious to me. But we know from his evidence that he did not investigate a single complaint. There is no evidence that he followed proper HR channels. And he admits he omitted HR in complaints entirely from his disbandment letter. If these complaints truly influenced the disbandment of the PKTT, they should appear in writing. Their omission suggests that he knew that they were flimsy, or perhaps he acted on them after he realized he was going to have to come up with a few more excuses as to why this unit was disbanded. And Advocate Khumalo picked up on this as well, because he asked, why did you not mention these HR issues in the disbandment letter? And Mchunu's answer is that he says that his legal advisor told him not to. The legal advisor is the new fall person for him, I think, in my own opinion, and says he would have breached security by writing what people had told him. And this is weak. Ministers can assert an anonymity to allegations. This excuse looks like backtracking to me. Now, Advocate Baloyi got involved and she asked what he actually did with these 8 complaints. Mchunu says that he discusses with his special advisor. I think this is going to be the new excuse going forward when we are done with this section, that he did not verify any of the allegations and he did not tell the National Commissioner because it would affect him and the people under him. This is a glaring contradiction. Fani Masemola is not the head of the PKTT. So why would raising complaints affect him? This answer just simply does not make any sense. Now we got to go into the individual complaints, and these are all weak and unverified. So we have Patrica Mashale here, and these complaints come from Facebook posts. Enter in Facebook. We have officially gone to this area where I never thought we would get to, but here we are. Now, Patrica Mashale is a former SAPS admin clerk. Senzo Mchunu referred to her as a police officer, but the commissioners were sure to distinguish that she had been a clerk, and she had been dismissed from her job. Following a disciplinary hearing, she walked out of her disciplinary hearing without presenting her side of the story, and then she went on to make sweeping allegations on Facebook. And Mchunu says that he never met her, never questioned her, never verified anything, but he looked at her Facebook posts. I'm telling you, Senzo Mchunu is spending too much time on social media. You need to take a break, my bro. And he took what she said at face value. Claims he was advised not to speak to her by his legal advisor. See what's happening? Do you see the new theme now that you can't blame everything on the medieval persuasion methods? And he says that she did not influence his decision, but he referenced her Facebook allegations in his evidence earlier. And Advocate Baloyi points out that none of the Facebook posts mention the PKTT. They all directed at other people in the police, not at the PKTT itself. Now, my note is that what the commissioners did is that they painted her as an unreliable witness, using Facebook posts from disgruntled ex-employee is absurd at a ministerial committee, but this is where we are at. And then we've got to go on to Mary de Haas, which is the most significant. So Mary de Haas, we've done a video on her, you know my feelings on her. She is a well-known KZN activist, most frequently writing about political killings. She claims that she has built this vast network of people who confide in her. But when she went in front of Parliamentary Ad Hoc Committee and accused the PKTT of medieval persuasion techniques, she never once provided a single piece of credible evidence. And Mchunu admits to receiving her letter, but never responded to it, never escalated it, never investigated, and claims it was in the environment, in his environment, but the letter did not influence him. Then later admits her letter was one of the reasons that influenced his decision, and then he would backtrack on it again. He accuses her of providing context only, but her language and his disbandment letter use similar wording. Advocate Sello points this out. Advocate Khumalo points this out. And he admits that, you know what, that's just a pure coincidence. He is basically saying he was influenced by her, or that some part of him was influenced by her. But he never bothered to check whether her allegations were true or not. Not a single investigation was done into any one of the allegations that were leveled against the PKTT. MP Fadiel Adams. So Fadiel Adams, he has been vocal against General Khumalo. It is his complaint that led General Khumalo to be investigated and stripped of his position. He is now back in the head of crime intelligence, which I think is a wonderful move. And his complaint was forwarded to IDAC by Cedric Nkabende. Remember him. This is the only complaint that he ever forwarded on to IDAC, according to his own testimony. And his complaint was about General Khumalo. It was nothing to do with the PKTT. It just happens that General Khumalo is the head of the PKTT. It was a disciplinary matter and a follow-up on a Western Cape case. But Mchunu still listed Adams as among, in his evidence against the PKTT. Just because someone is listed, and then Mchunu would go on to say, just because someone is listed doesn't mean they influenced his decision. This contradicts an earlier claim that he recalled the complaints when writing the disbandment letter. So, Mr. Fadiel Adams, we are going to have a little video about him because he is becoming more and more interesting as well. Now, then we go on to attorney Sarah Berger. She apparently had laid a complaint against the PKTT, but we know that she was arrested by the PKTT while investigating corruption at Fort Hare. She is a forensic attorney. Her charges were eventually dropped, and Mchunu did not engage with her. Claims her experience did not influence his decision. Another example of hearsay. He did not verify, yet use as background environment. What sort of environment? It was even said, streams or what? What is this environment that he keeps talking about? The environment in his own head, because things are getting more and more convoluted as the day goes on. And that's where we leave it for today. Another day, another contradiction. I will be posting an update tomorrow. It seems as though the commissioner is going to be going late, but I have some plans that I have to attend to. But I will update you with what else goes down tomorrow. And what I think is going to happen is that the advocates are going to keep tearing Senzo Mchunu a new one. Like I said, it would have been less painful to just admit that you're incompetent. And another reminder that in South Africa, the truth is never simple. It is always necessary. Now, if you find this breakdown useful, hit the like button, drop a comment, and share this video so more people can be informed of what's really happening behind the scenes. This commission is important. We can't treat it as another boring commission. We have to have social media eyes on it to hold our leaders accountable. Now, stay informed, stay loud, and watch your back.